Hey, grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Berean TV. We have an interesting program going on today. We're going to do something a little different. We want to speak on race relations and the church. Did the church drop the ball? And let me just introduce to you who on the panel. We'll start with you, Chaplain.
Okay. My name is Damon Butts. I'm from Mansfield, Ohio. I'm a chaplain in the prison system. I've been employed in the prison system for 23 years. I attend church in Columbus, Ohio, at New Birth Christian Ministries. I'm happily married to a wonderful wife, Ursula Butts, who's an outstanding praise and worship leader. I'm father of three, grandfather of three.
Okay, Pastor.
Hello, my name is Pastor Stephen A. Smith. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. My church is Pentecostal Church on the north side of Jacksonville. I am also an attorney and here in the office now. So looking forward to the discussion.
Sister King.
Hi, my name is Kamika King, and I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I'm a Christian, and I'm looking forward to a really informative discussion tonight.
Okay, thank you, Sister Sandra. I believe she's on the other screen. Sister Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'm from Northern California, and I'm Christian. I'm in Pentecostal denomination, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Okay, we've seen all of the events unfolding down there in Virginia. And I wanted to start with Sister King. Maybe you can read that. Your screen's clear. You have it pulled up. One of the comments. A lot of people know I often make videos based off of comments that people seen. And one was dealing with the conscious community and did the white man steal everything? And it was an interesting comment that a brother spoke on. I said, we'll touch on that. Then we'll segue straight into the situation. Did the church drop the ball as far as dealing with the church and race relations? Sister King, can you read that for us?
Yes, it says, before Europeans even came, Africans had not even discovered the wheel. Africa has more natural resources than any continent, and Africans did nothing with it. Whites came and actually used them for their benefit. All species compete for dominance and resources. Still, it's just a fancy euphemism for being stronger than, to somehow make whites guilty for being superior and dominating blacks in every way. And look at the strife and killing in many of the countries in Africa today. These people would love to dominate, but they can't because they are weak. Whites beat blacks at the game of life. Get over it. John Smith.
Pastor, what you heard what was said, right?
Yes, I did.
What do you think about that?
It sounds like some Darwinian mess, to put it into some less than stellar terms, but it sounds like survival of the fittest, and those who have that mindset that those who are equipped to ensure the survival of their pocket, whether it's family, community, or when you get ethnic background, race, they are those who should be able to ensure their posterity. And it's just another play on might means right. Might equals right. That just because I'm empowered to take over, that I deserve to take over. And so that's what it sounds like to me.
What about you, Sister King? What that sound like to you?
I
Because to
agree.
me, that sounds like somebody that don't know their history. When they start talking about blacks didn't invent anything, blacks didn't do anything, that's I have a serious problem with that. But I'm gonna let y'all speak a little bit before I show that other side. Sister King, what do you think about that?
I agree with Pastor Smith. It sounds like someone trying to justify what's going on in our society today on racial lines, when you can't justify what's going on in society today on racial lines. I also see someone not recognizing historically that every shade of mankind pretty much has had dominance in this world. And right now, it just appears to be the more white or Caucasian race, which are actually two different things, but the white race. And so they're just using that to justify their position, which isn't entirely correct.
I've seen something surprising can y'all do me a favor? Make sure you have your mics muted when you're not speaking. I saw something interesting on Fox News. Someone had it circulating on Facebook, the Black Founding Fathers. And the gentleman that was actually sharing, he was saying, why isn't this taught that there were Black Founding Fathers, people that were with the Founding Fathers that helped them tremendously, not slaves, that helped them tremendously during the formation of this country. And a lot of this stuff is because of ignorance. A lot of people say certain things because of ignorance, and there is a whitewashing in history. Now, as Christians, a lot of times people don't want to discuss certain things, but there's some lies that's been spread around for hundreds of years, beginning with the birth of a nation and that movie in the beginning of cinema and that movie being spread around. Chaplain, what do you think?
After reading this, I actually laughed when I read this. This is just something, reminds me of Aryan Brotherhood jargon that I've heard before. You know, in the prison system, I've heard, this is things I read back in the 90s that you hear back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That same thought process that's still prevalent today. This John Smith is very ignorant of history. He's very cocky, arrogant, but ignorant at the same time. I just laughed and said, wow, this thought process is still prevalent, not just in the prison system, but our public society right now.
And we've seen a rise of that with I don't know with the statement. I believe with that statement, we're going to make America great again. I believe that stirred something up in certain people's minds. What do you think, Sister Sandra?
You know, when I read this, I just stopped pretty much what has been said, but just someone that just did not or does not know history. When the first sentence says Africans had not even discovered the wheel. Well, you know, that's just so far off the grid. When you think about it, you know, in Africa were some of the first universities. You know, you look at Africans that were some of the first doctors with far as medicines, and so when someone says, when someone starts speaking like this, you know that they're just you know talking from their emotions, because they don't have any context.
They don't. Yes. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And I think a lot of times, like I said, I think it comes from just a lack of knowledge, from ignorance. When we start going back and we start dealing with Imhotep, like you said, first doctor, first multi-genius, when we go back to Imhotep in Egypt, and that's why it's always been such a great debate with Egypt, and they're attempting to take Egypt out of Africa, but Egypt has always been in Africa. And some people feel, well, in the Black church, we need to step up and teach a little bit more history because this thing has been whitewashed. But I remember in class talking Sunday, and Brother Gill brought up a point. Ultimately, when we deal with spirituality, Brother Gill brought up a point, color doesn't matter. If color doesn't matter, somebody else said, well, why do y'all make Jesus white if color doesn't matter? The wheel was we first see the wheel in about 3500 BC, coming in from prehistory, coming into history, in Mesopotamia. And it's a very, very, very good chance Mesopotamia wasn't full of Caucasian people. So he don't know all of these things. There's a lot of things that we need to discuss that people don't. But is that taking us away, chaplain or pastor? Is that taking us away from the gospel? If we interject history in our Sunday school lessons, and we're more cognitive, and we start dealing with certain things, are we changing our curricula? Are we going sideways? Are we going against the gospel? Or are we in a unique place here in the Americas because of what we've been through of people of African descent?
Well, I would say it depends on how you teach it. I mean, if you could teach a history lesson to coincide with the gospel, if you understand the gospel is the primary. the history is not the primary, the gospel is the primary. But you can see how history works in conjunction with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think, as you said, the church has failed on that. Our culture, a lot is not taught in the church in reference to biblical culture. You know, I read a book years ago, I think it's by Joyce Andrews, it's called The Bible Legacy of the Black Race. And it talked about things it gave a great history lesson, but also talked about from an African perspective. You know, there's another book out, I think, by James Nyiki that says Historical Christianity African Centered. And it talks about the African and how they played a role in the Christian faith throughout history. But that's not taught in the average Sunday school curriculum.
Like Thomas' book, How Africa Shaped the Christian Mind. That stuff is important. And a lot of people don't know. I think that's one of the reasons I really was heavy into the conscious community and studying the history is because I didn't know a lot. I didn't know a lot of African church fathers, Origen and Tertullian. I didn't know that St. Augustine, who's basically one of the fathers of the Catholic Church, was an African man. And these things aren't being taught. And I believe that these things are very important. What do you say? Well, anybody else? I'm sorry. I don't want to cut anybody off. I think that was Brother Dexter that just came in.
Yeah, Brother Dexter. How you doing? I like my comment. Back in the 90s, I was born again. I was a baby Christian. But there's a point in my life I really got into the conscious community and started studying Black history, stuff that I never learned in school. And actually, for me personally, it was my downfall in my faith in Christianity because I started backsliding. I became an angry Black man. I was almost as bad as some of these Hebrew Israelites. In the way that I thought. It just depends on a person because I experienced so much racism, growing up, coming from the South and everything. And it was kind of messed up when I really got into the conscious community and I really started learning about Black history. I didn't learn so much about the Black church, about Black Christians in the founding church fathers and, but basically just the Black history and the Jim Crow and everything, that really kind of messed me up, learning about that. So that's just all I have to say about that.
No, it's definitely a lot. Sister, I think that was Sister Lee. One sister Sunday in class, when we were in class, one sister said that the church dropped the ball. The church dropped the ball dealing with that. Not only just race relations in general. I've said that before on videos. I believe that the conscious community has got a strong foothold in the community because a lot of people that have traditionally looked up to the church, they don't anymore. Can you speak to that, Pastor?
Yeah, it seems that the Black church has dropped the ball. Let's just say this, that when we say Black church, we're really referring to the fact that historically we've had a disconnect, if you will, whether it's the AME church, whether it's the Pentecostals, AME with Richard Allen in the 1700s, or the AME with Kojic and AOG, Assemblies of God, and the separation, if you will, of the races in church. They say now that 11 o'clock Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the day or of the week. And so when we say Black church, we're just referring to the fact that the ethnicity is concentrated in some places in the church because the church is the body of Christ. And so, but really focusing on the issue, the Black church during the civil rights movement was the epicenter of the movement. Literally, it was not only the preaching of the gospel, but it was also aware of the social needs of the people of that day and that hour, and due to assimilation and integration and the years that followed, that the identity of the church was locked into social justice and in the civil rights movement, in obtaining freedom, the right to vote, Civil Rights Act 1964, the Voting Rights Act 1965, just those things that became monumental in securing freedom. That afterwards there was a a lack of direction, a focus in the church until you come to this technological age, this boom, and the zeitgeist of the times. The sign of the times is different, where where the name of Jesus is not respected, where God is not respected, if you will, in the culture. So the culture of the world has changed, and now the church is unable to relate, if you will. The gospel that goes forth is unable to relate in many cases to the issues that are going on. And so we come out of segregation and Jim Crow and find ourselves in essentially another new Jim Crow. And the numbers are bleak when it comes to minorities. And so as it relates to the ability of the church to impact the community and the culture, if you will, we've dropped the ball because we've been unable to spread the gospel in this morass, and there is left ourselves open for our members, for our children to be led astray with a false gospel, this Black conscious movement that takes our people away from Christ, and is able to define us better because the people have not seen us in the community. We're largely stuck behind the four walls of the church, and because we don't impact the community, if we were wiped out, if you will, what impact would that have on the actual community? And I posit that in many cases it would be very little, to the outside world. And so in that case, we have dropped the ball, and we've given the opportunity for this movement to come in with and impact our people. And so, to that extent, I believe that we have dropped the ball. The Black church has dropped the ball.
I saw something with Dr. Claude Anderson not too long ago, and Dr. Claude Anderson said, I'm not sure if I agree with him, but he gave some statistics also. He said we're not too far off from Jim Crow. We're not too far off from the 60s.
We're worse. We're worse as a matter of fact.
And he actually, that's what he's, yes. Do you agree with that, Chaplain?
I'm sorry. In some ways, yes. Some ways, no. It depends to me what angle you're coming from on that. I mean, there are some things, back in the 60s, I know my mom, I remember talking to my mom, and she was telling me how things were when she grew up in the South, and how the one-room schoolhouse, how they were segregated real bad and things of that nature like that. We're not like that right now, but I think, there are other areas economically, sometimes I think there's some issues that we can look at that's pertaining to that. So I think you can look at both sides and say in some ways yes, some ways no.
I think a lot of what I'm getting for as comments from people and stuff is, why isn't the Black church educating? And I hate to even say the Black church, the white church. That's how come I can't wait for Pastor Mason. He's out on sabbatical right now. But I can't wait for him to come back, because I visited Epiphany Church not too long ago. I went to the Epiphany over here in Brooklyn. And one thing that I see that I like is, I call the Antioch model that I see over there. We don't see a lot, like Pastor said, Sunday morning is still the most segregated. Sunday morning at 11 o'clock is still the most segregated time in this country. And I see a mixture in Epiphany Church. There's something that he has over there, that whole movement that they're doing, that I like to speak about. So I hate to really say the Black church and the white church, but one thing I do see that's a little different is that when we look at the Charlottesville situation in Virginia, we see more Europeans. We see more Europeans that's against other white people. They say they're not involved in this hatred stuff, and there's no place in America for this. What do you say about that, Sister King?
Brother, I'd like to make a comment. I'm this is Dexter again. And I'm from down. Actually, brother, I'm from Kentucky. Okay, and in the 80s and 90s, I moved to New Jersey, and I went to New York. And I'm gonna tell you something, man. The brothers and sisters in the East Coast and West Coast have a different attitude than the brothers down in the South, where I'm from. It's like it's completely different. So I mean, where I'm from, it's like a crab in a barrel. They hate to see another brother try to get ahead. I mean, they will stab you in the back, and I've been stabbed in the back by my own people. I mean, it's just a shame, man. I hate to say that, but I mean, I've been done wrong by more Black folks than I have white folks. And and that's to me, that's the biggest problem. I experience racism with my own race. I mean, it's just a shame. I mean, it's just really messed up. I mean, our races. I mean, I hate to say that. I'm being realistic, and I'm 55 years old. I've been through a lot, man, with my own race, and it's a shame that you got to deal with that. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's cold blooded how some of your own people do you wrong, man. I'm telling you.
Sister King, what do you say about that, Sister King? Like I said, I see more Europeans in Charlottesville and speaking against just speaking against this hatred in general. What do you feel like that? Can we do more as a people? Can we do more?
You know what? It's funny, when it came to the whole Charlottesville thing, I actually have friends that are in the Virginia area, and one of the questions that I asked was, when I did see us on the screen in Charlottesville, I did ask why we were there. Because originally when I was learning about the Charlottesville incident, it was portrayed in the media as a white on white issue, an issue about the removal of a statue and the alt-right and white people having problems within their community. And then when they did show pictures of African Americans or Black people, they showed young men that were singing obscenities against the police or standing on the sideline, kind of, I don't want to say making a mockery, but kind of inciting. And I know that wasn't the whole picture. I do think that as Black people that, to be honest with you, I think in this situation, it would be a good idea for us to step back and allow white people to be able to fix this matter amongst themselves. I think that a lot of the grassroots movements that we've seen in the last, I would say, decade has put us on the front line. And I really feel that we should still be in the fight, but I think that there should be some parity. I think that white people should be on the front lines fighting, speaking, and siding with us. So that's how
Sister
I feel.
Sister Sandra, we have to hear you on this matter right here.
Wow. Wow. Well, it is, as I think about it, I think it's a tough situation, because we talk about the Black church not being involved, but in my opinion, there's a complexity there. I think that, from my view, I see Black churches being involved in their community, some of them, and it may not hit the news, you may not see it, nobody shouting about it or yelling about, but they're reaching the community. People are coming in, getting help, and they're fighting. I don't want to even say fighting, but they're in their community working. Sometimes when you have some of the larger white churches, they may have some of that media savvy, and able to kind of put it on the news and this is what we're doing and what have you. And the other thing, as far as, having maybe a rainbow looking church, I have a concern about when you have white churches passing up people in their neighborhood that could be reached, and they're coming over into African American neighborhoods or people of color, their neighborhoods, when they're passing up the trailer parks right there in their backyard. And so you wonder, I'm just making my point, but you wonder, well, you wonder why people are doing what they're doing. So that's why I said there's a lot to, I think, race relations, and it's why are you doing what you're doing? why are you reaching? Is it to satisfy something in you, your own issues?
Okay. You should see. Can you see the shit? I'm wondering if you, Sister King, have a look in that camera right now. Chaplain, I need you to speak to that because I interviewed you last week and you said a large portion of people that come to the prison, that come to the penitentiary to do work in there are European Christians.
Yes, that is actually a fact. As I mentioned in the interview, a lot of those who come into the prison and who do prison ministry and do extensive prison ministry are mainly from the European churches. I've spoke about that with other chaplains. We've talked about that. I've even talked to other African-American pastors about that. And even some of the offenders in the prison system have commented on that. Why are churches that represent us or look like us are not coming in at the rate the European churches are coming in? I'll give a story, an example where there was a gentleman who was a European guy. He passed away. He was outstanding in prison ministry. I'll give his name is Bob Ray. He actually passed away a few years ago, but he was so into prison ministry. It was amazing. He was from a suburban area. He actually, there was an African-American from the inner city who was getting out. He asked could this guy come live with him because he said, I want to help this guy. And he got approved to have this guy come in and live with him. He took him to his church. They took care of him, got this guy a house, got him a car, had helped set up a checking account and showed him how to do things, got him into college. And he actually started doing very well. But it was a European church that actually did this for an inner city kid. And this guy had a great heart. And he didn't care what color this guy was. He just said, I want to help this guy. I feel attached to this guy. He said, I'm an older guy. He's a younger guy. I'm from the suburbs. He's from the inner city. He said, hey, God put us together and I'm going to do God's work with this young man. And he did it. Now, I was very excited to see that happen. But also I said, we need some African Americans doing this too, to be able to take that kind of risk. Hey, can we take a guy out of prison and have him come live with me? And then we're going to build this guy up to make sure that he's productive in society.
Because of the amount of videos and stuff that I have on different subjects dealing with race and the conscious community and how they feel about Europeans and all of this stuff, a lot of European people come to the channel and make comments and they say stuff like, well, why can't y'all do anything with the crime in Chicago, Pastor? You hear the stuff that they're saying. Why can't y'all do some stuff to better your own neighborhoods? How would you address that, Pastor?
How do you address the question of
those comments? These are comments. They come and I guess they're throwing some shots. They would come in the comment room and say certain things. Of course, there are people that come to the room and they state their opinion. You love the white man's book and this and that, and they don't like a lot of stuff that I say far as history and speaking against the conscious community. But then, like I said, there are white people that come to the room and they'll leave those comments also. Why can't y'all do more in your own communities? What do you say about that?
Well, I mean, look, the bottom line is that your own personal determination is what's going to cause you to succeed or to fail, and so personal responsibility is a great issue, and certainly an issue that we have to address. No doubt, but that doesn't absolve society of what it has done, and that whole that perspective, if you will, if given in vacuum, is short-sighted. It ignores the facts, it ignores history, and it practices histrionics or history. It literally changes history in favor of not recognizing the negative impact that slavery, hundreds of years of slavery, will have on a people, and not only that, but Jim Crow laws and de jure segregation, and then lynching and and those things, although it is not happening today per se in the way that it was then, it still has its impact. And when there are certain impediments that are put in your way, by way of just a certain segment of the population, when you've been redlined into certain districts financially, you're unable to obtain loans, if you will, line of credit, access to credit, just a different issue, the different systems that are set up that have racism embedded in them. And essentially it is a picking and choosing of the winners. And so the same type of people who leave those comments, they have absolutely no problem with corporate welfare, where those who are CEOs who are able to obtain lines of credit from banks, they have absolutely no problem doing so. They're able to obtain certainly credit and access to credit for mortgages, and so they have no problem building up equity. They're able to obtain GI bills, and they're able to pass on wealth to their posterity, to generations that succeed them. And so when you make that comment, it ignores the societal impact that Black people have had to endure over the years, and its present effects. There are present effects. I mean, literally, we have more black men, Black people in prison than we did in 1865. I mean, since pre-Reconstruction time. So, the 13th Amendment, when it was introduced, it did not. It outlawed slavery, but now we've gotten to a place where it's called slavery by a new name. It's called imprisonment. And so if you violate the law, then you are essentially become property of the state. You become a prisoner, and you become a slave of sorts. And you practice essentially, it's corporate welfare. You work for slave wages to provide services to corporations. You have private prison corporations, you have the prison industrial complex, where people get rich off of Black people's backs. I mean, it's happening. Literally, governments fund their corporate cronies, their corporate buddies, and their lobbies are able to take and siphon off the tax dollars in order to fund their private corporations, and they get their incentives, their dividends off of the stock that they have in these corporations. And so you cannot divorce the situation that you see today from the history of the people being disenfranchised. And that's what I'll say, that statement is short-sighted. Although there is a truth to it. There is personal responsibility and accountability is what's going to get you past it. I mean, literally, welfare, becoming a welfare state, it certainly, it provides a crutch. I mean, it helps in a sense if it's short-term and it handles a particular goal, but you can't provide a certain a crutch to people that they're permanently kept in a certain place where they get comfortable maintaining a certain level of success and will not push beyond that because it will disturb the amount of benefits they will receive. I mean, so I see it on both hands, but you can't deny that the people who are in charge of this system that's in place, whether it's our criminal justice system, whether it's our financial systems, and these institutions, that racism is embedded and that it is inextricably linked to the degradation of our people. It can't be said any other way.
Sister Saw, I'm sorry. Now, y'all know, I just want to remind y'all that Pastor Smith is a pastor, but he's also an attorney. He's a practicing attorney. And Chaplain Butts is a chaplain in the penitentiary. We definitely want to hear what you have to say on that. But Sister Sandra, I see your hand up. You people had affirmative action. I heard that sermon he just preached to us. Y'all had affirmative action. What more do you want, Sister Sandra?
Wow. Can I kind of address the last?
You have the floor.
Yes, okay. I'm totally agreeing with the attorney there. You see there is a disproportionate number of African Americans in prison. And so to compare and to look at and wonder why aren't there Black ministries coming in or what have you, I look at that and think, well, some of those people that are getting released, Big Mama and Papa, or whatever y'all want to call them, is getting them and bringing them to church somewhere. Somebody is most likely helping. The other thing is, I have a brother that is a missionary, and he's been a missionary for about 20 years, a foreign missionary. And one thing that we had discussed is, a lot of times you don't see African Americans doing mission work, but there is a reason why that you see. Well, the reason why, one big reason is you have white churches that have been doing it for years. So their kids are going on mission trips. Their families go on mission trips. They send their kids on these mission teams in the summer. So it's already it's already in you. African American churches, what I hear mainly is, we want to make sure and look and deal with our community, and that's important. We got to, but my point being is a lot of times it's exposure. So you talk about the prison ministry. Is there exposure to, bringing in and saying, hey, let's, this is the training that you need to have to go into the prison ministry and try to help, cuz and them, this is what you need. It's not as hard as you think to get in there. And so sometimes it's just saying, look, this is the avenue. But if you have white churches and they're fellowshipping with one another and it's saying, hey, brother, yeah, come on in. You can come with us and we'll show you how to set it up. So, I mean, it's part of that is, who do you know? Who are you connecting with to get this done? And if there's no connection there to say, hey, let me help bring you in and show you how to do this. I think that can contribute besides the finance part. And that's huge right there. Because he's right. You got money, you got pockets, big pockets that are able to help with outreach. So,
okay, Chaplain, you're gonna have to step in here. Before I get on Sister King with the backlash of the prosperity gospel, did we lose some respect because of the prosperity gospel and the foolishness we went through in the 80s in the African American church? Sister King, that's for you later on, but I need Chaplain to come in and address what was said. The pastor, who's a practicing lawyer, said something, as well as Sister Sandra, Pastor Chaplain. Can you please address that, being that you're involved on the front line with the prison ministry?
Yes.
Talk to us concerning that for those that didn't also get to see your interview.
Yes. Let me also clarify something that I was said earlier when I mentioned about not enough African American churches are doing prison ministry compared to the European churches. Now, we do have some African American churches and ministers that are doing an outstanding job in the prison system. I mentioned to you Pastor David Butler from Brooklyn, New York. Actually, he's been coming for the last 3 or 4 years, and he comes to Mansfield, Ohio from Brooklyn, New York, and does prison ministry. He's about 70 years old. He travels with groups of people. He brings people from different places, from Houston, Texas, Jacksonville, Florida, North Carolina, Philadelphia. He brings his church, a lot of his church members with him on every Resurrection Sunday, and they do the service. He's not at his home church during Easter. He's at a prison during Easter Sunday morning, and that's rare for an African American church to do that. And he brings a lot of his leaders with him, and he encourages them to come. They come with 20 people sometimes. And so I mentioned he's donated organs, donated Bibles, concordances, all types of books on church fathers in ancient church history, not just denominational history, but church history. He's bought articles on the prison system and how studies they've done on the prison system. He's also donated computers. So, you know, like I said, there are some out there that are doing that are outstanding. Like I said, he is like the top probably religious volunteer that we have by far, and he's African American. So, but we need more like him, more willing to do things like him. He's done so much. He's always asking, what else can I do to help the prison ministry and help the offenders? And all of them flock to him, African American, European American, Hispanic American. They all flock to him. They say he's like a church, he's like a father figure to us because he has a great heart and passion. Okay. Now, in reference to, because I mentioned in the interview before, there's a lot of people, like I said, make the correlation between even slavery and prison. And I mentioned I don't see that link, all because I mentioned that my study of slavery and how heinous it was, there's nothing that compares to that to me in history on how the African was treated, how we were, you know, we talk a lot in history about the slave master, but we rarely ever talk about the slave maker, who was the most brutal person out there and what he did to break the slave. And that, I don't see anything compared to that. Now, are there some things in prison that probably need to be changed? Absolutely. I talked about the sentencing, the disproportionate sentencing. That exists, and that needs to be fixed. Also, we look at sometimes how some are treated in there. That can be changed somewhat. Now, not to say everybody's treated bad in prison, no, but you have those who are part of white supremacists that are working in the prison system. That is there. It is there. Is it there in abundance? I'll probably say no, but there's some there, and I've witnessed it happen before. Now, I mentioned also that I cannot justify slavery and prisons because I can never justify anybody being in slavery. But I mentioned I can justify some people need to be in prison. When someone tells me that some of the crimes they committed, and it's against kids, it's against spouses, it's against when someone's multiple raping people, someone's telling me I decided to murder, got up this morning and said I decided to murder somebody, I just didn't know who I was going to murder. The first person I came in contact, I murdered. You know, that's justifiable to go to prison. But I can never say, oh, the Africans should have been justified in going into slavery. That's why I can't compare it to. I just can't get over that because I studied slavery extensively and it broke my heart to say we really went through this and we're still showing residual effects of that today. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't tell a lot of benefits out of slavery, but I know mothers who told me, my son got better when he went through prison system. Don't take that out of context, okay? There are some people who went in prison and became out better. I can't say anybody went in slavery and came out better. I can never say that. I mentioned before the baptism that I witnessed where the mother came in. We had a family day and the mother came in and the sister came in and watched her son get baptized. And I'll never forget the scream the mother let out when she said, yes, my prayers have been answered when he came out the water. And they hugged and embraced the mother, sister, and son who was the offender, and they all started crying. And I said, wow, that was amazing to see that. And she said, thank you, Chaplain Butts. Thank you for y'all for ministering and mentoring to my son. He's made a change. I can't say slavery can do anything like that. So that's the perspective I come from. Also, when I believe Sister Sandra mentioned about the prison, about even trying to make sure people understand how to do the prison ministry like that. I've reached out to pastors. I've had pastors come in and look me in the eye and say, I'm with you, Doc, we're going to do prison ministry. And they never return my calls after that. And I've seen them make promises, and not just in front of me, other people. And they were like, wow, he promised you he was going to do this, and he's clergy. And it didn't happen. So
Sister King, now, I'm sorry, Sister King, did you hear that? That's one of the reasons I'm asking you about the prosperity gospel, because someone said, listen, Pastor Smith, somebody said, when it comes down to it, Berean, they're not willing to invest. The African American church not willing to invest in their people. in long-term investment, they want to see something immediately now. Buy the pastor a car, get a new building, get a new van. They want to see something right now. If you attempt to invest the brothers that's incarcerated, maybe they'll come out and they'll become a pastor. Maybe they'll be law-abiding citizens, but that's long-term investment. Did the prosperity gospel and the need to have something right now kind of damage the African-American church, Sister King or Brother Dexter?
I would say that the prosperity gospel, to me, has been rather predatory. And it has put us in a position to where we have celebrity preachers who put their needs and their appearance above what the community needs. I was sitting here writing down a whole bunch of things as everybody was speaking. The prosperity gospel, to me, has shown a lack of balance. It has put people in positions to where there's no balance between practicality and spirituality, which is what we really need in our community. We need to know that faith without works is dead. It isn't all faith and it isn't all works. And I feel that the prosperity gospel has given people the impression that they can just speak something into existence and they can have whatever they want. I think the prosperity gospel has also made people feel that whatever their pastor gets is also theirs too. But they don't understand that if your pastor is driving, let's say, a Bentley, you can drive whatever car you want. But if your pastor is driving a Bentley, it doesn't change the fact that you still need to go on the bus on Monday. And so I really think that the prosperity gospel has been very damaging. It has kept us in a place of slumber where people aren't studying the word anymore, aren't critically, or rightly dividing the word, aren't studying the word. And people have, to me, appear to be more after personal gain and finance than they are living a life of peace and having rest for their souls. But I did have a one thing that I wanted to state about the prisons that I noticed that nobody said, and maybe it's just my way of thinking. But I did hear Sister Sandra say this about lack of exposure, and I was in total agreement. When it comes to prison, I think in the Black community, so many of us have family members in the prison, and we've done so much time already with them that a lot of people don't want to go back to prison to do any kind of ministry. And we have to get out of that fear, and we have to get past that. In the book, The New Jim Crow, one of the things that Ms. Alexander states is that the prison industrial complex or prison programs has not even really been on the radar until like the last 5 to 10 years. And I really think that's the same thing in our churches. It's not on the radar for us. It's still shameful for us. We would rather folk come home and just fall in line and get it together than to go back and help. And I think that's a serious, serious issue for us because we need to be honest about it. The fact is we all got family members in prison. We've all been affected, or at least majority of us, and we need to go back and help those men and women out of that situation and make them whole because they're being forgotten. And we need them in our community because they're going to come home and be part of the community.
I agree with you. Somebody said, listen to this, Pastor Smith. Somebody said that this is time because one of y'all said that the white evangelicals, someone else brought that up in a comment about the white evangelicals, and this is the time for them to step up. For what the white Christian evangelicals here in America. Because, there are a lot of people in the African-American church, I hate to say it, but they feel that the white evangelicals, a lot of them are like Christian organizations, like we spoke about in the class, like the KKK. Even if they're part of the Assemblies of God, they feel a certain way. They may not believe in the 2-seed doctrine, the serpent seed doctrine, but they feel a certain way or they're benefiting off of just being in the predominant culture, the dominant culture. What do you feel about that? This is a time for the white church to speak up, the white evangelicals to speak up.
It's past time for the white evangelical church to speak up. I mean, literally, but it's hard to speak up when the foundation of some of your institutions is in racism, is in the fact that I cannot be led by any institution that has a Black man at the top. And that because I don't believe in the worth of an African American, I don't believe that you have the intellectual capacity to lead me. I don't believe you in some cases are fully human. And when people have these distorted views of people, not truly believing that there's only one race, the human race. You get these outcomes. I believe that bad theology leads to bad outcomes. And sometimes, even when people believe in this curse of the black man through Ham, or Ham's son Canaan, they take these doctrines to the extreme and literally distort them to their own advantage, to perpetrate that which they desire to do in the first place. As it relates to their responsibility and justice, I think that we all, not just white evangelicals, but we all, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, we all have a responsibility, and that is to take on the character of God. And God loves justice and judgment. That's what he loves. He hates when mercy and truth are forsaken. He hates he hates a false balance. When you won't when you deny justice when justice is due. The prophets of old, they spoke of justice. What does the Lord require of man, of you, oh man, that you do justice, that you walk humbly before thy God, that you do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before thy God. But let justice, Amos, let justice roll like judgment run down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Those things are what God, even in Jesus Christ, what he said, you should leave those other things undone, all those sacrifices, and do those things that are more important. Do justice, and I think that sometimes it's hard to see ourselves in the other. That's just humans. It's difficult to see ourselves in the other, and it's the reason why God made this salvation, this faith, made it relational, that we have to not only have the vertical relationship, we have to have the horizontal relationship. As a matter of fact, he predicates the vertical relationship on how you treat your fellow man, and you have to love your neighbor as yourself. And so if we take on a culture of love, by literally take on the character of our God, we will look upon things, and we will have a difficulty overlooking, have a difficulty walking past and seeing justice and injustice and judgment not being done, and we would literally see ourselves in the other man. And so, yes, it is beyond time, past time. There are issues going on in some of the evangelical, some of the denominations, whether it's the Baptist movements. They're dealing with those issues even now. They're coming up, and I think it's past time for it to be so. So I think it really has to do with the matter of the heart. That when you see someone who is putting their race before their faith, that they're not truly practicing Christianity. That it's past time for pastors and for elders, for those who know better, to call racism what it is, sin. When you see yourself as being superior to anyone else, then now you don't see yourself in Acts 17:26, where he's made of one blood, all men, to dwell upon the earth, and has predetermined the bounds of their habitation. Like God has made us all one, especially in the body of Christ. And so it's difficult to pronounce this gospel to people when they see, even amongst our own selves, that there's this discriminatory racism that's still going on. And these are the dichotomies, the paradoxes that we have to deal with in the Black church, even more so when it comes to those who have become learned, even in seminaries, Bible colleges, and divinity schools. When you see that the curriculum that's given does not even address the impact of society, of the institutions on African Americans. The last thing I'll say is this, and this is regarding the work on prison ministry. By having that many men of any race behind bars, it literally separates them from their family. That is a breakdown in the social construct. It is difficult to survive without having a man present, without having a woman present. You know, if you remove one of the heads of your family households, you literally are left impotent. You're left trying to fend for yourself and even survive in this culture, in this society. And so now to try to reach back and still try to preserve the relationship there, it is wholly difficult. People, literally, the most difficult person I believe it is to be in the world, even in America, is someone that's poor. It costs more to be poor than anything, because you're taxed all throughout your life and you're barely making it. And so, there's a great thing. I mean, this is, I think, the last thing I'll say, and I'll stop. But the issue with Jesus, when John's disciples wanted to know, whether this is the man, that he was referring to, he told his disciples to come with him for a while. And he said, now go back to John, tell him that the dead are raised, that the blind have their sight, that the deaf receive their hearing. And the last thing he says is that the gospel is preached to the poor. And the question came to me, who cares about poor people? And most people don't. I mean, literally, you're invisible when you're poor. You're almost invisible or dispensable. And so to have a heart to care for people that no one cares for is something that literally, that if your own don't do, it's difficult to have someone else do as well. So those are just my thoughts.
I thought myself being involved with prison ministry and everything. I thought more people in the African American church would. I said, well, this will solve the thing right here. I have sisters that are single. So many brothers are in there. I thought automatically the church would be more involved to get brothers saved and introduce them to the Lord. And I believe a changed life in Jesus can definitely bring you up, because I've seen what it's done for me. But I want to bring up one last thing before we wrap it up. A pastor said, you hear me, Sister King? A pastor said, integration is the worst possible thing that could happen to us as a people. A pastor, a learned pastor with a degree. And he said he had the Holy Ghost too. He said the integration is the worst possible thing that could have happened. And he said, you see that they don't want us around. And he brought up Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and the AME church and that whole fiasco that got them, that caused them to be driven out of the church and set up their own African Methodist church. And he used that as example among some other things. And he said, and it's okay. But now I don't believe that, because the scripture says, Brother Dexter, that ye are the light of the world. And the Bible said we're the salt of the earth. I believe, like what I see, what it really touched my heart, like I said, that I see in Epiphany Church, that I see with Pastor Mason and the other Epiphany churches, what they're doing and how they're so integrated. And that's kingdom. When you see kingdom citizens, I'm supposed to sit next to an Asian brother. I'm supposed to have a European sister over there, some other brothers over here. I'm supposed to have that when I'm in the kingdom. And that's what I talk about with the Antioch model. Do you think maybe it could be God and we can still really be separated, and integration maybe weaken us? This is open for anybody.
Really, I'd like to go back to we talked about the Klan. Actually, I don't consider the Ku Klux Klan actually a Christian organization. I mean, they may go by name, but actually their life had not been transformed. They're not walking in the Spirit. They're not bearing the fruit of the Spirit. So I really don't consider them Christian, because actually I know that they don't have Jesus Christ living inside of them just by the fruit that they're bearing. But back to your question regarding integration. Actually, I have seen in certain churches, whatever, there may be some jealousy of envy because of dealing with the and also some racism too. Just like go back to the Azusa Street, the history of the Azusa Street, the Pentecostal movement of the early part of the 21st century. When Daddy Seymour, he's the one that founded it basically, and he was working miracles and this and that and everything. But basically, there's so much racism that they booted him out. I read the story years ago and everything, but just that it comes back that if there's racism involved in it. That's because that person is not walking closely with Christ. He's not in that word. I mean, regardless if he's black or white, whatever, if he has that spirit of racism in him, he's not walking in the spirit. He's continuing to walk in the flesh, and his mind has not been transformed by the renewing of his mind. So I mean, he's still worldly. He's carnally minded. So regardless if he's black or white, that's the way I look at it. I always judge somebody by the fruit that they bear. I observe them closely. They call themselves a Christian. I'm come to just observe them and see how, if they really are going to walk that walk with Christ, and if they really know Jesus Christ. That's the way I kind of look at it.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Anybody else?
Yes. Pastor Smith said something very key, and Pastor Smith, if I say it wrong, correct me, but you said something in regards to if a person's heart's not right.
Yes.
And also, if they put their race in front of their faith, they're not practicing true Christianity. That's the ultimate statement right there.
Amen.
Because our faith in Jesus Christ is the ultimate of the gospel.
Yes.
The Bible, the theme of the Bible is the story of the redemption of man through the atoning blood of Jesus Christ. We can't get beyond that with the gospel. And so anything that goes outside of that is not Christian. Brother Dutcher made a comment about the KKK not being a Christian organization, although they say in language they are, but their deeds and actions totally contradict the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he said, we will know them by the fruit that they bear. Jesus talked about, gave me the Great Commission about where to preach the gospel to all nations. And we talked about this Sunday that word nation, the Greek word is ethnos, where the word ethnic comes from. The gospel is to be preached to every ethnic group available. And if we don't do that, then we're practicing what I call a pseudo gospel, which is a false or fake gospel. It's not really a gospel. It's something else. It's like putting a mask on something and saying that's who you are. The person underneath the mask is who they really are, okay? And that's the problem right there that I see a lot going on, is that people keep putting things in front of the gospel, where the gospel is supposed to be primary, not secondary.
I agree.
Well,
anybody else?
It's Sandra. I think it's wonderful to have a church with all different cultures and people, different hues of skin. I think that's a great thing. But my concern is if you are reaching out to different people, different cultures, and what have you, and your leadership looks one hue, I got a problem with that.
Okay.
I have a problem with that, because to me, that's you fulfilling something for you. That's not real. That's not a multicultural community, because somebody of another ethnic group, they may not be able to understand where I'm coming from. It doesn't mean that we can't church together, but it does mean that somebody in leadership should be able to understand where I'm coming from. And I shouldn't have to. I heard a discussion, I forget where, but it was, it might have been Jude 3. I don't remember. But the concern was, leadership. If leadership is not being represented, if I'm not being represented within a leadership of the church, then there's a problem. Because what happens is I'm going to have to end up leaving my culture, leaving who I am, to really reflect what you consider the dominant, or consider what is right in worship. Because we worship differently. In a sense, our culture comes into play. If I go to India, their culture comes into play. If you come to African American church, your culture is going to come. If you go to a white church, their culture is going to come into play. So if I have to put away my culture to be able to fit into your church, there's a problem. Now, if we can all integrate that together, and I've seen it done at some churches where they're mixed, the leadership is mixed, there's different cultures. The music is mixed. The way that they present the gospel and teaching is mixed because they have different teachers from different cultures, and so it works. It can work, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing. But I also seen where I mentioned kind of earlier that I had a discussion with a guy, and he was so happy and proud of himself because their church was, a multi-million-dollar church. They had all kind of seminary professors that went to the church, and they were just, millions of dollars that they put in their missions department and what have you. And he said, oh yeah, we're getting, young men, African-American men, and they're going into basketball camp, and we're doing, I said, oh, okay, where'd you get them from? From the university? I just wanted to see what he was going to say. Oh, no. They, come from, from, I guess, the hood, basically. I said, okay. I said, well, what's your leadership look like? I just wanted to hear. Oh, well, no, we don't have any African Americans in leadership, but we got members that are African American. And so that to me was not that to me wasn't how you mix a mixed culture church. That to me is there's still some issues that leadership needs to work through.
Sister Sandra, did you put that comment in the other video? Somebody made a comment in one of those videos, and people make up names. Somebody put one of those comments in the video, in the bottom of one of my videos, and they say, well, black folk quick to follow a white pastor. But
no, I didn't say that.
That wasn't you? Okay.
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't, because I don't have a problem with white or whoever has, if you're teaching a word, but if we're talking about mixing a church, having a church being mixed, I want to see somebody that looks like me in leadership. You
feel the same way in government?
Absolutely. If I live in a black area, I want to see somebody in government or my city council. I want to see somebody that looks like me and can represent me and not assume anything about me necessarily, although we are different, but still there's some things that even in worship, I think it's just important. I think you'll see that in Acts, you get all kind of people. That's, how did we get deacons? Because there was an issue with the, with certain groups of people not being served. Well, you know what? They ended up pulling leaders or people that were from that group to be able to help serve them, to bring a balance. And that's the thing. There needs to be a balance that is represented. And sometimes we can't be sensitive to that unless we are part of that sometimes. And I'm not, you can't make a blanket statement, across the board, but I think it's important to be, you have to be sensitive to, okay, I want a multicultural church. Well, I'm okay with leadership being mixed. I'm okay with somebody not looking like me being over me.
Okay.
And so there.
I got you. All right. In closing, chaplain. In closing, pastor. In closing, Dexter, Sister King. In closing, what can we do? What can we do? If somebody's out there, they want to do more. What can we do? Because a lot of us will criticize, we'll say this and we'll say that. What can we do? If you can share with anybody, Pastor Smith, if you could share with anybody, what can they do if they want to do more in their local church? Because we didn't even touch on the whole thing that there are a lot of people that's doing, oh my goodness, what's the other gentleman's name that wrote the book, How to Quit Church Without Quitting God? Because there's a lot of people that believe in God and they've totally given up the church. I know so many people, they're still believers, but they haven't been to church in years. And they're just not in that place right now. Some from church hurt, others from they're just tired of whatever they claim they're seeing, I know the church isn't perfect or anything, but I believe church is still the order of the day. There's something about getting together and congregating. There's something about corporate worship. I believe that's important. And there's definitely a anti-church spirit. And it's partially to blame because of certain things that people have done in the church. But what do you think can change some of this stuff?
I'll say, and this is piggyback on the last question about about segregating, the pastor making a suggestion about segregating, there's a quote by that's ascribed to MLK that said, "I fear that I've integrated my people into a burning house." And that quote is very profound, because it seems as if you look at the plight of African Americans now versus at that time, it was almost better. You were saying in some ways almost better, but now that we're separated, we don't have the group appeal or the ability to pool ourselves in a good way. It's one of the criticism of the Black conscious community that we in this is the Black church, or the church that Black people attend, if you will, most has the best ability to pool financial resources, and as the Bible says, money answers all things. And so, but we invested in white banks, and we don't encourage group economics. We don't encourage those things that could help pull ourselves up. Now you have the question from the white man. The guy that said, why don't you pull yourself up? Well, it would mean that we would have to take our resources that we spend with everyone else. We are consumer people. We consume a whole lot, and we're a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if we pulled it from those places and put it into our Black institutions, certainly we would be self-sustaining. We would be much like the people of God from the Old Testament, and their ability to sustain themselves. And so there is something to say about supporting your own. But I'll say this as well. If you're talking about having an exclusive, Black only church, I believe that is not in line with the Gospels. And I certainly realize that all your skin folk aren't your kinfolk. That not everybody is for you, even though they look like you. They're white brothers and sisters who would lay down their lives literally for a Black brother or sister, literally. And so, and I know that I have friends like that, and I've recognized that people who don't hold prejudice in their heart, and at every turn, it's one of the things you see in Virginia, that they're literally fighting that battle because they don't feel that we should have to fight another civil war again. And so they're picking up the mantle and fighting it as well. But I'll bring it back to say what should people do? What should people do at this point? The first thing I'll say is that as far as church-wise, there are three things that we need. One, we need a sound theology. We need a sound theology. We need to understand our faith and what we believe, because your theology will develop your worldview, and your worldview will develop into your acts. As a man thinketh, so is he; in his heart, so is he. You will act out that which you believe. The second thing we need is new strategies and methodologies for this age, because we need to be able to reach the generation that has not come up knowing this God, that there has rose up a generation that does not know God. And so now we need to teach those things. And the third thing we need is the power of God. We need the power of God in operation. So that means if you're going to have the power of God, it means you're going to be consecrated, you're going to be sanctified, you're going to be in your word, you're going to engage God in prayer, praise, and worship in the way that he's called it, and that we're not going to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as is the custom of others. Literally, we need to come together in corporate worship. There's a power in it, the iron sharpening iron, that kind of thing. And then we're going to, when we establish our faith, we're going to operate in true ministry. What is ministry? As Jesus said, when I was outside, you took me in. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in jail, you came and visited me. And he said, and we asked, well, when did we see you? Well, we never saw you in those places. He said, well, well, anytime you've done it to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. That is what we have to get back to. The works, we can't just abide in Paul's scriptures and his writings where he says he gives us the doctrine of the faith. We believe in faith, but faith, it gets us into the kingdom. It gives us an interest into everlasting life. Now let's go on to our brother James' writings, and he will tell you that faith without works is dead. It abides alone. And so you show me your faith, I'll show you my faith by my works. And so we need to have works that demonstrate that we believe in this Christ that has brought us to salvation. And I believe doing those things, we'll certainly show ourselves. He says that when people see our good works, they'll glorify your God, your Father, which is in heaven. And I believe that's what we need to do. We need to give people something to glorify our God in heaven, and that will come from our works.
Okay, Sister King. Well said, Sister King.
Thanks.
First, I'm going to need Pastor Smith to stop stealing my notes.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show, that the Spirit is moving. I believe, I believe fellowship is what you make it. And I may repeat some of the things that Pastor Smith said because I'm in total agreement. I really think that it starts with us. If we are going to improve our communities, if we're going to improve self, improve our communities, spread the gospel, opening of the prisons, to those who have been in prison, then we're going to have to start with ourselves. And I listed out a few things here that I think that churches could really start doing that would help. First and foremost, as the pastor said, it's about doctrine. It's about our theology, having right theology. So I really believe that churches now, our fellowships nowadays, really need to focus on foundational teaching. At any given time, especially on a Sunday, you have different levels of believers and unbelievers congregating together at one time, and people are constantly cycling into the fellowship, but nobody ever does a foundational teaching or a Bible 101. People don't know who God is. People don't know what the Bible is, and most definitely people don't know who they are. They don't know what's actually expected of them. And I think those are the basic foundational things that every Christian should have, so that when you do step out to do missionary work, or you do step out to just, take a break from the actual, let's say, church fellowship, you won't fall into a pit and go to hell. Because that is the biggest fear that folk have, is that if they leave the church, that they're not going to be able to be sustained in Christ. So we do have to have those foundational teachings. I also believe that there needs to be more transparency in the selection of the leadership. Going back to what Sister Sandra said, we need to know why people were chosen. We need to know that it's not cronyism. We need to know, that they are qualified to be in the positions that they're in. Are you called to be a pastor? Not are you just a second, third, or fourth generation pastor? We need to know that you are thoroughly equipped. A lot of people aren't equipped, which is why we have so many people getting church hurt, because the people that are being selected or put into position are not equipped to minister to the souls. We need to also, as individuals, apply ourselves. You want to change in the church, change it. So you have to come and you have to apply yourself. You have to be willing to intercede for souls. Everybody's anointed to intercede in the body of Christ. So you need to be willing to intercede for souls. You need to be willing to come take the trash out. You need to be willing, to give, generously to the fellowship, so that we could prosper and so we can share with others. If you're not willing to do that, then you can't complain about what anybody else is doing. Just a few more. The pastor said invest in the ministry. I agree with that. Increased evangelism within the community. Get outside of your four walls. You need to hit the streets. You need to hit the block. People shouldn't see you come only on Sunday and then do their dirt on Monday through Saturday. People should never know when to expect you there. The doors of the church should always be open, so when they see you, they know that you mean business. I believe in smaller congregations because I think it's important so you can deal with the hearts of individuals and be able to focus in on if there's any sin or any little foxes that are destroying the vine creeping in. But lastly, I think that once we do all that, we need to learn to be all things to all men. And that is not something that our fellowships teach nowadays. You have to learn to be all things to all men. Everybody that comes into the fellowship isn't going to have your same background, but we all, can learn and be part of the ministry of reconciliation and consolation. So that's what I believe.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, Brother Dexter,
Yes,
and then Sister Sandra and Chaplain, you wrap us up.
I think the biggest problem with both the white and the black churches is the lack of Christology. There's not enough teaching about Jesus Christ. You really don't go too much in the Gospels because the Gospels are hard. They spend more time in the epistles, Paul's epistles, and because actually it was written to the church, but they really don't get too much into the Gospel. They don't know Jesus as in the book of Matthew, he's a king. They don't see him in the book of Mark, he's a servant. In the book of Luke, you don't see him as the Son of Man. The book of John, I see him as the Son of God. He's the deity of Christ. Like we talked about in class, the hypostatic union, the deity, his humanity and his deity. And they don't understand. The church, they don't look at these different offices. They mean as a prophet, priest, and a king. And there's not enough teaching in the meat of the word, and that's what we're missing. That's why I think that some of the people in the churches, they don't really know the scriptures themselves. I was at a barber shop, and this young girl was talking about. I overheard her in a conversation with this other girl. She's saying, that so and so prophet was prophesying to me and said this, that, and everything. And I kind of observed and listened to her conversation. And I asked her a question. Said, "Sister, what's your favorite Bible scripture?" She kind of stopped. I guess nobody's ever approached her and asked her that question. She kind of stopped. She said, "Well, I think it's in the New Testament. It was in Proverbs. She didn't know the difference between the New Testament. Well, she didn't know where the scripture was at, but it was in the Old Testament. But I basically gave her a word of encouragement. Go ahead and stay in the word, that and everything. But the whole thing is that I don't think that the churches are really teaching proper doctrine, or not really getting to the scriptures and not really teaching the meat of the word. They may give a little milk, and they may be preaching about tithing, spiritual warfare, about angels, but not really getting into the books. So what the genre of that book? Do more with instead of doing topical type teaching, you do more of what's the word that we talked about the other day? I'm trying to get off the top of my head, more of a expository type preaching, and that's what we're missing. Expository, and that's just going through line by line and going from, like, for example, you take a whole book and cover a whole book, and it may take you several months, it may take you a year. I mean, that's what the churches are missing, and that brings them to the pastors because they're not spending time in the Word. You're not spending the time studying in the scriptures, and that's as a pastor, that's his calling. That's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to know the scriptures, supposed to spend that time in prayer and fasting, and be filled with the Holy Ghost. When he gets up there on Sunday morning, the Holy Spirit is working in power, and lives are going to be transformed. People are going to be saved, and I don't see that in the churches. And I've been various different churches. I have seen it just a little bit, but not as much as it should be. And hopefully we will see it, in the future.
I hope so. Amen.
Amen.
Sandra, I agree.
Wow. It's hard to come almost last because there's so much good stuff. One thing that kind of that I thought about was our accountability, understanding that we are accountable to God, and teaching the congregation that you are held accountable for yourself, for your study time, your study life, your prayer life. And I think sometimes, and that'll help mature saints, that'll help mature Christians, because if people are okay with being immature, they're going to continually just stay with, the baby stuff. I'll read, Psalms, I'll read Proverbs, I won't try to, I'll just stay with the milk. But I think part of it is teaching and saying, look, you are accountable for your Christian walk, for study, for prayer, for your relationship with Christ. And what's going to happen is I think, well, everybody's kind of, you get out of the four walls, because then you understand that the gospel is real. And that's what God is calling us to do, is have relationships outside of the four walls. But that comes with maturity. You know, a little baby is going to be scared to get out the four walls. Mm-hmm. But as you grow in God and you understand the word of God, how complex it is and how deep and rich it is, then you say, okay, well, let me get out there. And then you can deal with some of these social issues, rightly dividing the word, rightly looking at them in a mature way. And so that's my thought, understand, getting people to be accountable, you know, besides all the other good stuff that everybody has already said, but accountability and teaching accountability and maturity, you know, encouraging people to grow in the Lord, not stay a baby. Don't stay there. Grow up.
Amen. Amen.
I agree with you. Good stuff. Chaplain, come on, bring us home.
You know, everyone kind of had a reoccurring theme that I think is extremely important. And they talked about basically sound doctrine, sound theology, proper teaching. That really needs to be the center of everything first. Because, you know, like I heard someone say that people don't really know who they are in God. You know, and that's important right there. I think that, you know, I remember talking with someone, they mentioned they didn't know a lot about salvation because all they thought that they had to attend church. And attending church is not the same as salvation. They're two different things. And those things need to be focused on and say, you know, hey, not just saying, well, let me go back. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, I believe in his book, Adam, Where Are You? 21 Reasons Why Black Men Don't Go to Church. He talked about 3 different types of churches: the containment church, the entertainment church, and the liberation church. And I think people need to pray about, first of all, where are you supposed to be at church-wise? You know, because if I look at Acts 2:48 and it talks about God asks to the church daily such as to be saved. I tell people, first, pray where you're supposed to be at first, and let the Holy Ghost lead you to what church you're supposed to be at. And then while you're there, you need to grow and understand who you are in God in reference to Christ Jesus. Romans 8:19 talks about creation eagerly waits for the revealing or manifestation of the sons of God. That is very powerful. It's talking about all of creation eagerly waiting for us to get to where we are in God. That changed your whole focus and scope of ministry when you think about that. And things like that need to be taught in the church. You're just not a body. You are a representative. It talks about what's called the disciples' prayer. Many call it the Lord's Prayer, but we call it the disciples' prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. That means there's some things going on in heaven and God's supposed to mirror the earth, and he's going to do it through us if we submit ourselves willfully to him. So if we can just get to that point. Now, I remember people asking me at work sometimes, hey, how do I get involved in church? I say, well, first of all, is your heart passionate? You have a right passion to do things. When you do that, then pray to God sincerely. Open your heart. Lord, show me where to go. And don't be afraid when God tells you to go into ministry that you don't think you want to do. You know, I go back to Pastor David Butler. He said that when he told me that, he said, Lord, send me and I'll go. And he said he meant it. So when God sent me to Mansfield, Ohio, he said, Lord, there's 1,000 churches between Brooklyn and Mansfield, Ohio. And God said, remember your prayer. Send me and I'll go. So I sent you to Mansfield. And he said, I went. So God may send you into areas that you may not feel you're equipped. But it's not about us. It's about him. If he sent us there, he's going to equip us. If we submit ourselves to him. So trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not to our own understanding. In all the ways acknowledge him, he will direct our path.
Amen.
So if we come from that perspective, and then once God leads us into what ministry we're supposed to be in, then we come to the proper way to whatever church structure, how we get in ministry. And say, hey, and just be patient, but be persistent. And the thing is, if we just turn our lives over to God fully and everything we say and do, and be led of the Holy Ghost, Bishop Jordan years ago told us that our survival is in the Spirit. He also told us, I shared this Sunday, about we are being the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And the salt has to come out the salt shaker to make contact with non-salt to be effective. So we have to have that type of passion that, hey, God has blessed me to help change.